Started in high school tutoring students who needed help with Latin. Then my interest in Latin was accelerated when I participated in the State of Illinois Latin contest. And all schools in Illinois that taught Latin gave the same exam to all students in all 4 years of Latin, and sent on the best 2 papers. The students who wrote the best 2 papers at each level, I was one of the 2 people who ended up at the top in the state of those levels. And when the contest wasn't held in '43, Knox College offered me a scholarship, which I appreciated greatly. In college, I continued to major in Latin until my second year, when I was able to start taking Greek from the dean of the college. Unfortunately, that year there just weren't any Latin jobs available around the state that I wanted to take, but I got a job with the company as a service representative, and I did that for a year. The following year, a job opened up that I wanted to take because it was in a town where the high school superintendent was an old friend of mine from college. So I went there for 1948 and 1949 and taught Latin, French, and 3 years of English. At the end of that year, a job opened up closer to Chicago, where I lived, and I taught at Batavia, Illinois, from 1949 to 1950. Then in 1950, I was nabbed by the superintendent principal of Oak Park River Forest High School in Oak Park, Illinois, and that was a really good job. And so I went there for 3 years. I had been going to the U of Wisconsin every summer to work on my master's degree. The last summer I was there, summer of '52, I met my future husband. In '53, I retired from teaching at Oak Park and moved to Madison, Wisconsin, where I enrolled immediately in the University of Wisconsin to work on my PhD in classics. That got me back on the upward path to what came later. Well, before the big break, in 1955, our son was born, our first child was born. Abruptly, I became a housewife and mother for 10 years. So big break is the big word for it, because I really had very little anticipation that I'd ever get back to my profession. But in 1962, my husband was invited to come out to the University of Colorado in Boulder to look over the department and see if he'd be interested in coming out here as chair of the chemistry department. So we moved out the spring of '63 by chance, but luckily, 2 of my former classmates at the U of Wisconsin were on the faculty of the classics department here, and they remembered me, and all of a sudden they needed somebody to teach Latin for them, for a professor who wanted to retire that spring semester, and they asked me to teach Latin for him, and I said I'd be happy to do that. So that got me back in almost the right position to keep going. But I didn't have my PhD yet. So they invited me to finish my PhD here at the U of Colorado. And I proceeded to do that, to work on it here. And in '68, started teaching as the full-time professor in the department. I taught then for 23 years in the classics department here. And during 4 of those years, I was chair of the department. Every year, I taught 5 courses for the department, 2 semesters of lecture courses in English on masterpieces of Greek literature, masterpieces of Roman literature. I taught beginning Latin for graduate students in other fields who needed to learn Latin to do research for their own higher degrees. And that was a 2-semester course. I also taught at least 1, sometimes 2 semesters of Latin or Greek authors who were on the graduate reading list. At a certain point, I started teaching, instead of masterpieces of Greek and Roman literature, I started teaching a course on women in antiquity Greece and women in antiquity Rome. And there was a difference there in what women did in Greece and Rome, since there was a 500-year separation in the process. Well, in 1991, I became Professor Emerita, retired, but that year I also was asked to become president of the Classical Association of the Middle West and South, which, despite the name, was a national organization. I was in charge of putting on, organizing, and managing the annual meeting in 1992 in Austin, Texas, which was a 3-day meeting with papers from both the Greek and Latin sides given by professors in the field. But after that year, I then was kind of twiddling my thumbs for a while. And then in 2004, we lived in this building, and I realized that our board of directors president needed a secretary. The board was desperate enough they were happy to appoint me secretary, and then I was elected properly the following year, and did that from 2004 to 2010. And of course did regular secretary's duties, writing up the minutes for every meeting, but also writing up a quarterly newsletter for what was going on in the building. Then I retired from that job because I thought I was losing my hearing, and I didn't think I could hear people well enough to be writing the minutes any longer. So I quit, and then realized in 2017 they still needed me, so I went back on the board again, and I'm still on the board now. The crowning achievement had to have been my year as president of CAMLS. And I think in 2015, I was awarded an Awatio, as it's called, by CAMLS. And in 2015, I received that award, which I have a sign in my study. Anything that I had, any legacy I could command, I would like to pass on to all students of classics, wherever they are, and hope that they will continue their study of classics, that they will think seriously about becoming teachers of classics themselves, because I think that knowledge of Latin in particular is so helpful to everyone who speaks English.